Neither of these people are on Zoom.
Okay, how do we...
Got the Hapu.
Where... Welcome to this extraordinary council meeting, Tuesday, 6th of August 2024, where we have one substantive item on the agenda, an item that's required for us to consider due to recent legislation. Welcome to everybody who's in the room and everybody on Zoom. We've got a number of people on Zoom. I won't go through them, but they'll be listed in the minutes. Welcome to elected members. We have some observers in the public gallery today too. Welcome to everybody. And I'll call on Councillor Handford to do the council blessing.
Ia mātou e whiriwhiri ana i ngā take kei mua I o mātou aro, e pono ana mātou ka kaha tonu ki te whakapau mahara huapai mo ngā hāpore e mahi nei mātou. Me kaha hoki mātou katoa kia whaihua kia tōtika tā mātou mahi. Mā te maia te tiro whakamua me te hihiri, ka taia te arahi I roto I te kotahitanga me te aroha.
Kia ora, Councillor Handford. We have some apologies today. We have an apology from Richard Mansell, Chair of the Waikano Community Board. We have our Deputy Chair, Michael Moore, in his place. We also have an apology from Glenn Olsen, Paraparamu Community Board. And I believe we have Bernie Randall here in his place. Welcome, Bernie. Any further apologies? Can I have somebody to move those apologies? Moved by Councillor Handford, seconded by Councillor Spires. All in favour? Aye. That's carried. Do we have any declarations of interest? We don't have any public speakers. I'll just check in. Is there anybody in the public gallery who'd like to speak today? No. Leaves of absence can be forwarded to the Mayor's office. We have no matters of an urgent nature. So we move to 7.1, consideration to affirm or rescind decision to establish Māori ward. Welcome, Sarah and Mark.
Kia ora koutou. Just before I start, in terms of the report, I believe there is a letter to be tabled from Ngā Hapu o Taki. Yep. Would now be an appropriate time to table that letter?
Yes, absolutely. So
Yep.
We have a letter here from Ngā Hapu o Taki. Does everybody around the table have a copy of that letter? Yep, we'll table that now. Thank you.
Thank you. So look, you have a report before you which asks you to either affirm or rescind your decision to establish a Māori ward, which was a decision that this council made in November last year. This active decision is required as a result of the Local Government Electoral Legislation and Māori Wards and Māori Constituencies Amendment Bill, which received royal assent on the 30th of July. So just very recently, as you know, this date, it was the evening of the date that Council resolved its initial proposal for the representation review currently underway. But as Council resolved to establish the Māori ward without a poll, this Council is required to either affirm or rescind the decision now. So the details of this matter are set out in the report. I believe you'll be somewhat familiar with the amendment bill, which is now an act, as it's been a discussion for some time. So I'll leave it there, but happy to take any questions. We also have, I believe we have, do we have Dale and Ben online? Yep. So we have Dale and Ben from Election Services online who are also able to answer any technical questions. Thanks.
Thank you. I'll take questions. Councillor Wilson.
Oh, no, I'm just happy to move it when it comes to it.
Okay, so Councillor Wilson has indicated that he would like to move, and Councillor Handford has indicated she'd like to second. Bernie, Mr. Randall.
Yeah, through you, Ms. Mayor, to the presenter of the paper. If the councillors decide not to have a Maori ward, will this whole matter still have to go to the representation review?
Thank you for the question. So if today councillors decided to rescind the decision to establish a Māori ward, then they would have two options. One option would be to revert back to the existing representation review arrangements that are currently in place, which would mean that council need to conduct a representation review next cycle. The other option is to conduct a shortened representation review, which would basically commence straight away. The timeframes are really tight, so council would need to, I believe, resolve its initial proposal on that by the 30th of September. So there are two options in answer to your question, which are set out in the report.
Councillor Butler.
Good. Thank you, Madam Chair. Quick question. If we decide to go ahead with a Māori ward and come election time, local government election time next year, we do not do a poll. If I read the Act correctly, that automatically cancels the Māori ward? Am I reading that correctly? So if a poll does not take place, the Māori ward is deleted as a part of the course.
So if you decide to continue with the arrangements in place, continue with the current representation review and affirm the decision to establish a Māori ward now,
Yep.
then you will be required to, there is a requirement in the Electoral Act now that a poll must take place.
Okay,
So the poll is not optional.
so it's enforced.
It is mandatory. So so that would be a matter of our local electoral law if council were to consider that.
Okay.
So not an option.
Okay, Nami.
Councillor Cooper.
What was the cost of the shortened? So, if we don't affirm and we just can it, the cost stops for the current representation review? Or what are the cost implications of affirming or not affirming, please?
Yeah, thank you. So, look, in addition to the paper, we did send out a spreadsheet which detailed the costs of the representation review to date, which is the costs of the preliminary engagement, plus some of the costs related to the initial proposal. So, if we continue with the representation review, if council affirms the Māori ward and we continue with the representation review of the initial proposal, we estimate 61,000. If we have to do a shortened representation review, at this stage we're estimating the costs are pretty similar. We estimate that it will still be in the order of $61,000 to do a shortened representation review, because you still have to work up another initial proposal. So there's just as much work involved in the shortened representation review as there is in the one that we're ready to go out with on the 8th of August.
Thanks, Mark.
Johnny Best.
Yeah, look, just for clarification, I mean, I know that there's been an amendment to the Act, but basically, wasn't this simply just sort of reinstating the referendum provisions of the Amendment Act that was done in 2002 by the Labor government?
In terms of the poll provisions, yes, that is correct. So there have been a series of amendments to the Local Electoral Act, and earlier provisions provided different options around a poll on the question of a Māori ward. Yeah.
Councillor Pravanov.
Yeah, thank you. Just following through the chair, thank you for just following up on Councillor Cooper's question. So if there is no agreement to go with a poll at the next elections and the current arrangements stay the same, there is no cost, as opposed to slightly looking at the boundaries.
So I think what you're suggesting is that if council was to rescind its decision to establish a Māori ward and agree to maintain the existing representation arrangements, there wouldn't be additional costs other than those that we've already incurred for the representation review underway this triennium, but council would be required to do a representation review next triennium because that will be the 6-yearly cycle. Yep.
Thank you.
Councillor Warwick.
On page 11, the figure is $240,000, but you mentioned 61, so is the difference already spent?
Thank you, Councillor, through you, Your Worship. So, look, the report says that we've got a budget of $240,000 and that the remaining cost of the representation review is roughly $15,000. So we were requested to break that down, and we've had the opportunity to have a look at the budget properly. And so at the moment we're tracking well below $240,000. So that was the budget, that was the provision. The review has been a much lighter touch than what we had anticipated. So we simply aren't incurring the external legal fees that we anticipated, and we had actually anticipated having to resource this with external resources. Instead, we've actually been able to resource this internally by some secondments and making, career development opportunities. So the representation review of 2024 is not costing as much as we anticipated. So the report did say it's about $15,000, which effectively indicates that we've spent roughly $225,000. We haven't. We've spent $95,000. If you opt for option 1, we think the whole cost will be $156,000. If you do a shortened representation review, we think it'll cost $156,000. And if you decide to rescind and do nothing and revert to the existing arrangements, we think we've still got about another $5,000 just closing everything, winding everything up. So we think it'll be about $100,000. So the cost of this representation review will be in the order of $100,000 to $156,000. So the report as it stands was incorrect.
And so my next question is, if we decide to stay with our Māori ward, we still have to have a poll before the next election, and that poll will be binding as to our decision on whether we don't have a Māori ward until the next election, but that could be, the poll could change that anyway. Yeah?
So, if you continue with your Māori ward, you have a poll, the result of that is binding, but it doesn't take effect until the next local government election. So you would have a Māori ward councillor in place for 3 years.
Okay, 2025 on.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, but
cool.
you would then need to do a representation review to work out how that Māori ward councillor comes out of the arrangements.
I've got Councillor Coe online.
Hello. Sorry, I'm in Sydney. My reception's not that flash, and I had to duck out for a minute when it crashed on me. So, forgive me if this has been asked before, but I'm really concerned about the situation where we have a poll and it fails.
Sorry, just to catch you up, we're in question time now, so no opinions until we reach debate, please.
Yes. No. So I just want to have. Yes, I appreciate that. I just have some questions around that. So, if we have a poll and it fails, where does that leave us then in terms of going back to our community and saying we wish to have a Māori ward? So,
is that a question for staff, Councillor Coe? Is that a question for staff, and does it relate to
Yes.
items in the report? Can you point to a number of the report, please, then? So I don't think she was online when we answered that. I think that's the problem. Repeat your question, please. Sorry.
The question is, if we are required to have a poll at the next election and the poll fails, so the community says we do not wish to have a Māori ward, how long would we then have to wait before going back to our community with the proposition that we do have a Māori ward?
Yeah, so if the poll says that the community do not want a Māori ward, then that Māori ward councillor will be in place for 3 years. But at the same time, council will need to conduct a representation review. So 2027, I think is the year, to determine how the Māori ward councillor comes out of the representation arrangements in place. Does that answer your question,
Yes.
Councillor Ko?
No, it didn't, because if we at some point wish to put forward the idea of having a Maori ward, and we've had a poll that says the community does not wish to have one, are we then committed to not having a Maori ward for time?
Yes. So the outcome of the poll is binding on council. So
The support of
it doesn't take.
community or otherwise a Maori ward.
Sorry, Liz, you seem to have frozen up. So we'll just go to Bernie Randall, and we'll come back to you if that's okay,
Yeah.
Bernie.
Yeah, my question is very similar to the previous speaker. So basically, the situation is this, that if at the next coming election next year, people they vote for the councillors, and then they have a poll to vote for a Maori ward, right? The poll for the Maori ward will be after the councillors and the Maori representative, right? So you have a Maori ward representative elected, then you will subsequently have the poll, within a very short time period, in which the people may decide not to go ahead with a Maori ward. Therefore, that Maori ward representative will only be in for one term, correct? Yeah.
That is correct.
Yeah.
Right, I'll go back to Liz and see if we can get that connection working a bit better. I don't know where we're at, so maybe start at the beginning of the line of questioning that you were on.
Okay, what I'm saying is if we have a poll at the next election that says the community does not wish to have a Maori ward, what opportunity do we then have to revisit having a Maori ward?
So, as I said, that decision's binding, and it takes effect for 2 triennial elections. So it will be in place for the 6-yearly cycle, 2 sets of 2 terms, and the representation review that is. So then beyond that, council will be able to reconsider that decision under the legislation. Dale, did you want to add anything to that I haven't covered?
Yeah, so once the outcome of the poll is known in 2025, it's effective for 2 triennial elections, so that's 2028 and 2031. So council can then reconsider whether they want Maori wards after 2031 election, so in 2032.
Right. Okay, so I guess, we run a risk that if we decide to proceed and it goes to a poll, we will run a risk that if the poll goes against a Maori ward, it's going to be quite some time before we can reconsider introducing a Maori ward.
You're getting nods there from that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Liz.
Okay.
Councillor Pravanov?
I think through the chair, I thought I had this in my mind, clear in my mind. So at the next elections, there is potentially a poll for a Maori ward.
If we decide.
Yes, yeah, there's potentially. So in terms of the nominations for elected members and for councillors, at the same time, is there also going to be, I suppose, regardless of the outcome of that poll, Maori, because this council has actually agreed to have a Maori ward, can Maori nominations also be received? Yep, okay, yes. So the answer is yes. Then what happens if it fails when the election process has gone along the line of having one less district-wide councillor and a Maori ward? And so that actually creates a whole lot of issues, because you're not going to have a Maori ward person and you've got one less councillor. Have I got that wrong?
Well, I think I understand what you're saying, but because you would need to conduct a representation review to determine how the how the arrangements look. Without a Māori ward councillor, you would have the opportunity to reconsider the number of district-wide councillors, the number of ward councillors, all of the things that you've been considering in the representation review that you've been carrying out to date.
Okay, thank you for that.
Councillor Cooper, I'm going to want to move on to the moving and seconding soon.
Does
Because
the
a lot of these questions have been
does the
answered in
poll
paper.
for the poll to decide whether we want a Maori ward going forward, does it have to be undertaken at the next election, or can be undertaken within 3 years of that triennium?
It must be undertaken at the
okay.
next elections.
So everybody's got some clarity. I think the nature of the questions, it's not often we have a lot of questions where the information's in the report, but I think it reflects the complexity of the situation. And I think it's unintended complexity of the situation, which has been thrust upon us. So I'm going to now move to the motion, which is going to be moved by Councillor Wilson, seconded by Councillor Handford. Right of introduction.
So just to be clear, I'm introducing A. I'm recommending A, not B or B1 or B2, but A. Just very quickly, this decision to have a Maori ward was made in the full knowledge that there was legislation coming, and what that legislation was likely to look like. So nothing has changed. In fact, the only thing that has changed since we voted to introduce this is it's got cheaper, quite a lot cheaper actually. So in that regard, the significant question I have is not around there's going to be a referendum or this or that or whatever, because a change of government actually would change all of that again, and so that's why we've got what we've got. There was a change of government, and then everything got thrown back up in the air, and you get another change of government next time, and same thing. So we just have to carry on and do what we do because we think it's the right thing to do. That's the decision this council made last time because it was the right thing to do. The one question I would have. It's not a question.
No, people can ask questions at any time.
And it's not a question for staff.
Yeah, they can.
Well,
actually.
if you
A
let me
question can
finish
be
the
asked at any
sentence,
time.
Councillor, I really want to play this little video I got which would explain things. But the question I have is that those who would oppose this, the question for you is, what do you think will happen if there's a Maori ward, Councillor? What do you think will happen in this room that you would be opposed to? So you should have a think. People should have a think about that, because I think some of the responses are just purely emotional responses, or they are endemic responses, or they are parroted responses. I'd like people to, if they're going to respond in a negative, to explain why, what they think will be bad. What's the bad thing that will happen if they think a bad thing will happen that they would want to vote against this? So that's been moved.
Councillor Coe.
Yes, I can tell you what the bad thing is. So I'm really concerned about the risk of running a poll and the poll fails. And I think that would be the worst possible outcome. If we wish to have a Maori ward in our community, we need to play the long game. And to me, the results of the submissions that we had a majority of people were against a Maori ward, and we adjusted for that because we know that young people are inclined not to vote. We had so there's always a skewed result in submissions, and also in polls, and also in elections. And we know that older, more conservative people are far more likely to vote or submit, and they are less in favour of a Maori ward. So I'm really concerned about that, and I'm concerned that we would be in effect throwing $60,000 or so down the gurgler in the process of finishing this review, only to have it fail at the polls, and then we've wasted that money, and we've blown our chances really of pursuing this until, 2031. So to me, it's a no-brainer that we should take a breather, have a cup of tea, and wait for a change of government, or wait till the time is right. If we wish to genuinely have a Māori ward, I think it's just too risky to continue on down this path. And I believe there are other ways in which we can protest to the government, which aren't going to cost us $60,000. Thank you.
Well, I'll pitch in my contribution to debate now. If we want to have a Māori ward, we just need to continue the process we're on, and we'll have a Māori ward at the next election. The fact that there might be a gap between no, you've had your right to debate, Councillor Coe. The fact that there might then be a gap after that is another question. But if we want to have a Māori ward, we've got the opportunity now to have one, because regardless of the result of the poll, we'll have a Māori ward at the next election. So that's the question we should be asking ourselves. We shouldn't be trying to predetermine the results of a poll. We've done a survey which told us certain things, but during a survey, you're more likely to get people coming out in opposition. Give our community the chance to have their say about this, is what I think. And we did what we did for reasons. And my main reason is that decisions should be made by those most affected by them. And Māori voters should be able to vote for a Māori ward. That enables the best representation for all Māori in our community. We've got partners who sit around the table, and we really value that relationship. And we're conducting an in-depth review of that relationship at the moment. We're not dropping the ball on that one. But that's only one string to our bow. So I encourage us to stay the course, go through this process, give our community the chance to have a say, and carry on and respect what our iwi partners have asked us to do. With this letter that's on our table, with the communication we've received via email, and by a clear indication at the last 2 Te Whakamininga o Kapiti meetings that that's what they would like us to do. I'll go to Councillor Hanford.
Yeah, kia ora. I don't have too much more to add other than to tautoko Councillor Wilson's comments and also that of the mayors. I think it's interesting that we would consider it to be a no-brainer to pause. I think, as the mayor said, it seems like a no-brainer to honour Te Tiriti and to do everything we can to reflect that partnership and relationship, especially considering the backing that our mana whenua partners have given having a Māori ward, and also the fact that the poll probably did bring out a lot of that, the survey did probably bring out a lot of that opposition. I think with a poll, it'll be in front of a lot more people, this kaupapa, and there'll be surely some opportunity to explain what a Māori ward councillor will do, what their role is. And as Councillor Wilson said, I don't think there's anything to be scared of in someone taking on that role, holding that mantle. And I think actually it will contribute so much to our council conversations, and also to what we're able to achieve for our communities, our diverse communities, reflecting the fact that really there should be nothing about us without us, in the sense of making sure that Māori are able to have their voice heard around the table and actually participate through voting at council meetings. So I'm fully in support of recommendation A, and think that if we were to pause now, again, why did we make the decision in the first place then to establish a Māori ward? We need to stand in that conviction, knowing that it was the right thing to do, to honour the partnership, and to, as you said, to stay the course. So happy to support recommendation A.
I think Councillor Halliday has had his hand up for quite a long time online, so I'll go to him now.
Can you hear me okay?
Can't hear you very well, Councillor Halliday.
Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me okay?
Your sound quality is not great. If you can just use your device rather than your headphones, if you can try that.
I'll turn my headphones off.
Yeah. Try something else.
Is that better?
Yeah, that's much better. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you. The headphones were great for me hearing the conversations.
Look, when taking on board what Councillor Coe was just saying, and Madam Mayor, your words were fantastic. Play the long game. When's long enough? 4 Māori seats were introduced to central government in 1867, which was supposed to be a temporary measure, interestingly enough, but I can only assume that there was value. And it was acknowledged because they were increased to 7 in 2002. Took a while. That was central government looking after central.
So you've frozen, Councillor Halliday. You were in the middle of a very good. So backtrack maybe a couple of sentences.
Okay. So in Māori representation was increased to 7 in 2002, 7 seats. It took a while, but that was central government looking after central government. That was progress. But for some reason, barriers have been put in place for a very long time for local government to have a similar representation. That's all changed, and it's long overdue. But now again, we have more overreach by central government happening. Local knows local. A democratic process is and has been used that is reflected by those elected by their local communities to represent local interests. Let us do our jobs. Local knows local. There is nothing to hide here. We don't govern by referendum or polls. This whole situation has been fueled by, in my opinion, a minor party that's separatist, and also, in my opinion, it's embarrassing both nationally and internationally. There's got to be countries over the world just looking at us going, what the heck's going on here? There's nothing to hide here. You know, I'm fully support the motion. We're doing what we're meant to be doing, and someone's trying to throw a spanner into the works. Central government will do what central government does. If we wait any longer, it's not going to make a difference. 3 years, 6 years, 9 years. Let's just follow the process through. We'll have a Māori ward. It will be seen to be valuable, and it will be there by democratic process. I have no issues about that, and I don't think there's a heck of a lot of people out there that do. I just think there's a bit of a lack of understanding about the processes and how this all works. Because for me, that Māori ward doesn't just bring that representation to the table, but they're out there working in that Māori community, just like we as ward councillors are working in our communities. I think it'll be a fantastic addition to the table. That tied in with our representation from Mana Whenua, the operational relationship we have will be only, as I've seen over the last 4 years, and a positive addition to the council table. So very much looking forward. We've got some work to do with regards to the poll and getting people understanding what that means, what that represents. But I think we're up for the challenge and looking forward to it. Certainly supporting Nigel's motion, and let's just get on with things. Thank you.
It's Nigel's motion now.
Sorry.
The motion that Nigel moved and Councillor Hanford seconded, to clarify.
Yeah, very supportive.
Thank you so much, Councillor Halliday. Councillor Warwick.
I support Janet's thoughts on this, and I think it gives us a great opportunity from 2025 for the 3 years to see how it works, and then we can become advocates for it to stay, because things will change in that time, I'm sure. Or maybe we won't be advocates for it to stay, but we don't know until we try. So I'm supporting Nigel's motion too.
Mr. Butler.
Ngā mihi, kia ora tātou. From a community board perspective, the last sort of 18 to 20 months, we've been having and growing our relationship with our local iwi, which has made a massive difference to how we operate. We can also see how Ngā Hapu Ōtaki is doing things for the whole community. What we could potentially see is a Māori ward position which allows non-iwi Māori to have a say, but that person will actually give, sorry, I'm just trying to make sure I go the right words here, will actually allow us to have further representation, and it's one of those little tools in the toolkit for undoing the last 180 years of underrepresentation. Councillor Halliday has talked about how central government put in some seats very, very early, and it took a long time to expand that. we may find that the Māori ward is fantastic and it can be expanded at a further time. What I particularly rail against is the fact that central government, just as people have said, is overreach. For a party that campaigned on putting local back into local, they're now telling local exactly what to do. So from an Otaki Community Board's point of view, we can't vote, but we totally and utterly support there being a Māori ward in place. We completely give up on the chance to see what a Māori ward will do if we just roll over and allow us to be told what to do. There is a chance that the poll will go against us, but there's also a chance the poll would go for the Māori ward, and we completely lose that chance to have the Māori ward affirmed in the poll if we rescind our decision now. So I do urge people to vote for the Māori ward.
Councillor Cooper.
Yes, thank you. I think it's quite interesting. If we continue on the track one and don't rescind, we're forcing the referendum at the next triennium. The issue with that is if we go to referendum and it's a landslide against a Maori ward or heavily weighted against a Maori ward moving forward, where does that leave the council and where does that leave Maori? And I think that could be a really dangerous, divisive thing for the community and for the council, because if it's heavily against a Maori ward, then come 2031, how does the council then reconcile that and push for a Maori ward when clearly the community they serve is against it? And I think that's one of the unintended consequences of what's been forced upon us. So I think it's a point to think about. I actually voted against the Maori wards, so that leaves me an interesting dilemma as well, because I voted against the Maori wards. Yeah. And unfortunately, we're in this position because I don't think it's healthy for anyone. Thank you.
I'm going to go to Councillor Pravanov next.
Thank you through the chair. So we have recommend A on the table. I just want to clarify, there's actually two other choices that we have for that recommendation, but they haven't been, it hasn't been identified which one that would be taking there. And so...
So it's A. Councillor Wilson kindly clarified that for me. I should have done that from the chair. Would you like it up on the screen so that we're sure of what we're moving today?
So if you actually go to B1 and B2, I'm not sure if that is correct. If I can have staff to answer that, please.
Okay, we'll park that and we'll have a little look at it. Did you have any other contribution to debate today?
I did, thank you.
Okay, go on with that. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you. So I, in the previous, I suppose, decision on this, I voted against it. And in terms of any outcome, I have to say, I'm quite interested in the outcome and the dynamics that it would create around this council table. But saying that, I'm sort of taking a pragmatic approach. One is that there is an extra cost to this where, we have heard from our community about the cost of spending money. I'm also aware that the survey that we had previously lost, and I'm not sure whether there's going to be any change to that. And so that leads me on to the comments that Councillor Coe said, that if this fails, then there's going to be a very long time frame between when this option can come up again. I'm also aware that this is about Māori representation. So we have 3 Māori representatives around this table who are paid about $50,000 each. Only one iwi consistently turns up. And so I suppose I'm concerned, I'm trying to think about how all this works together And, you know, when people are given the opportunity to represent their iwi, it's not necessarily happening. So I suppose in terms of where I'm sitting on this, I'm still going to vote against this recommendation. Thank you.
Councillor Kirby, the Deputy Mayor, online. First of all, we're going to get an answer to that question. So just looking at my papers, we've got A or B, and B includes B1 and B2. B1 or B2, yeah. So the options that are outlined in the table are clearly presented in the recommendations. So that A means that we continue the course we're travelling. So you don't need B1, you don't need B2 either, because we don't need to introduce any extra pieces of work. But I'll go to staff to clarify that.
That is correct. Yep.
Yeah, so just to be clear, we're moving A. And I'll have that up on the screen. If you still have a concern about that, please come back to us, Councillor Pavanov. So I'll now go to Councillor Kirby.
Kia ora, Madam Mayor, thank you. Can you hear okay?
Yes.
Great. So there's a couple of things here for me that I just wanted to comment on. We made a decision in November last year, and the decision was including $240,000 of costs for the representation review that was going to follow as a result of establishing a Māori ward. I'd like to congratulate staff really on the fact that we're now looking at only 156,000 of that 240,000 that was budgeted. That's a significant saving. And there have been a couple of comments around the fact that if we affirm the decision that we're wasting 60K, actually we're not, because we've already spent 95, so we'd be wasting 95 and adding another 60, which we'd already budgeted for, and is actually less than what was originally proposed. So I think cost is just a red herring in this, and I'm conscious of many other times I've raised the fact of cost around things, but we've already budgeted it, it was already approved, and that money has already been spent. The fact that we're now looking at only 60 and not another 150 is credit to our staff and the work that they've done. The bigger question for me in this debate is not about actually what will happen at the poll or what will happen with future governments. The question for me is, what sort of a future do I want for my kids, and what do I want the New Zealand country and society to look like? And more than that, what do I want our Kapiti Coast district to look like? And one of the things that I've seen and I appreciate so much for us as New Zealanders is our bicultural foundation of Te Tiriti is the huge amount of who we are as a nation. You just have to watch the Olympics and see how much Māori culture and te reo is being used and represents us in the global arena. We have to acknowledge that. We have to work forward from that foundation of our country, acknowledging that there is a multicultural aspect to our society moving forward that we celebrate, but it starts on the bicultural foundation that was formed. And so for me, this decision is actually what I think is the best thing for the future of our community. What I want my kids to grow up in is an environment where culture is celebrated, where difference is enjoyed and diversity is celebrated. And the way that we can do that, I think, is by honouring the agreement that was made, that was signed at Te Tiriti, that ensured that there was opportunity for Māori to be involved in decision making. And so that's why I'll be supporting and continuing with our decision we made in November last year. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kirby. I'll now go to Kim Tahiwi.
Kia ora. Clearly I'm in support of the motion. And probably I just want to touch on what a couple of people have touched on in terms of throughout the whole process, we've had a lot of opinions on it. Firstly, on the survey, I don't consider the survey is what the public wanted. I consider it the voice of a minority that completed a survey. So that's just how I see that survey. And obviously there's limitations around that as well. But if I think about the actual issue and what I've heard around, don't fix what's not broken and things like that, I suppose from my perspective, it's about the point in time. So, and I was trying to think of an example to explain it simply. So if I, for example, steal my sister's earrings, then I have children, I give them to my daughter. She has them for her lifetime. She's used to them, she's grown up with them, she loves them. Her cousin comes along one day and says, "They're mine, your mother stole them from my mother, give them back." She's obviously going to be upset because she's never known that story. I've obviously never told her I was a thief. Okay, so she doesn't know that. So she's going to be upset when the change happens. But does that make her cousin any less have a right to those earrings? No, it doesn't. And that's exactly what we're talking about here. Many, many years ago, we were denied the right, Māori were denied the right to vote. And we are simply asking for a little bit of that right to be reinstated. The fact that it upsets so many for so long is only indicative of how long it's been able to continue. And it's not a point in time where we can go, this is not broken, let's not fix it. It's been broken for a very, very long time, and we are simply asking for a small portion back. Now, as to your comment about the mana whenua seats, yes, not all the mana whenua come up here every meeting, because we meet more than once a month. We meet very regularly outside of this forum, so we know whoever sits here carries that mana whenua voice. And that's how we work outside of this. The Māori ward also allows those who are not mana whenua in the Kapiti region to have their voice. They have their voice through us as well, but sometimes they would like to have their voice direct, and it also gives them their opportunity. So obviously I'm supporting it. Thank you to all the councillors that have, and I think you should just push on.
Right, thank you. I'll go to Councillor Wilson for a right of reply.
Yes, thanks very much for that. Lovely earrings, by the way, Kim. Yeah, I know. So you say. Yeah, just to the point that the Comrade Coe made, it is a bit like if we play the game, we might lose, so let's not play the game. And I just don't think that's the way to go. I think what happens, and to assuage some of the misgivings that Glenn's got and others, I think what will happen is that we will have a Maori ward councillor, and in 3 years' time, the public will realise that the sky didn't fall, that this was a really good thing. In Porirua, for instance, the Maori ward councillor down there is Kylie Wehapi. Kylie is the deputy mayor of Porirua. Anybody who has seen her in action will tell you that she is an incredibly valuable part of that council, hugely valuable. The idea that some racist dog whistling would get rid of people who are able and willing to contribute. And by the way, anyone standing as the Maori ward councillor, it's a huge ask. It's a massive ask. So you have to run a campaign similar to a mayor. It's across the entire district. I think what will happen, and by the way, the sort of oh well, we don't know what we're going to get kind of thing. Well, the public didn't really know what they were going to get with us. When the wise people of Waikanae decided that I would be the ward councillor, they were taking a bit of a punt. As it turned out, it was a hugely successful manoeuvre on their part, but it might not have been. You know, it could have been disastrous. But so they wouldn't not vote just in case it was disastrous. They made a very well-considered decision. So I'm thinking we do the same thing, and then we'll move along. So I expect there will be at least 8 councillors will vote for this, which I think is an overwhelming support for it. So let's do it.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Everybody clear on what's been moved and seconded and happy with it? It's up on the screen. The proposal on the table is to affirm the decision to establish a Māori ward. All in favour, please say aye. Against?
Against. I'm against.
Okay, that's carried. Thank you. Oh, are you calling a division? Okay.
Sure.
A little late off the mark there, but I'll allow it.
Those against, hands up, please. And
Can we stop the screen sharing, please? Thank you.
against, Councillor Coe.
Sorry, this is against, just being clear. Councillor Halliday, your tick on the screen is recording you as against this motion. Is that intended? You're voting against.
Councillor Brovanov, Councillor Cooper. And those in favour?
Oh, Councillor Coe online.
Yes, I got you.
Yep.
Got you. Worship, Councillor Kirby, Councillor Halliday, Councillor Coford, Councillor Spires, Councillor Warwick, Councillor Wilson. Oh, I missed Councillor Henford. Councillor Henford. Thank you.
That is carried.
Great stuff.
Okay, so we move on to the closing karakia. Kia tau ngā manakitanga ki runga I a tātou katoa. Kia hua ai te mā kihikihi e ki ana. Kia toi te kupu, kia toi te reo, kia toi te wairua, kia toi te mauri. Ki roto I a mātou mahi katoa I tēnei rā. Haumie hui e tae ki e. Thank you for your attendance, everyone.